What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up, a holiday edition of Crossed Up, a free agency edition of Crossed Up, if you want to call it that. Anthony Sanfilippo is here. I'm Bob Wankel, and yes, we did go away for about 2 months. We were just too sad to do this show. It was just too depressing. Postseason wrap. I'll see you in Clearwater, and that's enough. But now we're back, and listen, we want to talk a little bit about what's going on here with the Phillies offseason, the movement that they've had, the lack of movement that they've had. And, candidly, Anthony and I, we called up briefly yesterday, said, we better put out a show. We're doing this again, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You want to talk about it now? Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, let's get that off the top. Obviously, people are going to see this episode and be like, oh, where the hell you guys been? And we always, I think if you go back over the years, we've always kind of taken a pause after the season is over. And maybe we could have done one more before we left, but regardless, and we go like, all right, get through that Thanksgiving holiday. We'll do something around the winter meetings. And so that's where we're at. And we'll try and continue to do this as news happens with the Phillies here in the offseason, or doesn't happen as it is right now, pretty much, other than Jordan Romano, which we'll get to shortly. But the one other thing I wanted to kind of bring up, and Bob and I were had a meeting about this recently, yesterday, as you mentioned, is that there's going to be, and we're not going to say specifics just yet, but there is going to be some changes coming to this podcast. The target being the beginning of spring training. We're still going to do it. Bob and I are still going to be part of it. Everything's going to be, kind of what you're used to with the two of us, but there are going to be slight changes. We'll talk about that as we get closer to the time. But just know that starting sometime in mid-February, we're probably looking at a little bit of a different format with the podcast, and we'll get into that, like I said, as we get closer.
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, we sort of alluded to this back during the season, that changes were coming, and then some momentum halted, and then we had to regroup, and we just decided let's finish out the season as is, and we'll address it over the offseason. Here we are now. We have a plan. We are going to continue to do Crossed Up for at least another handful of shows. But long story short, we're essentially going to transition the show from Crossed Up to another iteration of the show. It'll still be Anthony and I. It'll still be the same show at its core. But really it just comes down to licensing rights. We don't control the show currently. We want to control the show. It's just all stuff like that. And
I no longer work for your company. That's the other part of it too.
yeah. Anthony's working at On Pattison. We hate him. The whole deal. So basically, we're going to re-platform the show, and there's really no reason to keep that a secret. But what we want to do is continue to record Crossed Up throughout the winter here, give time, for people to know where we're going, how to get to us, and all of that. So we've built up a pretty good following here on this channel, and we're going to have to kind of break it down and start over again. So we're going to use the winter as a transition period. So that's the long and short of it. As far as not recording up until December 12th, I'll be honest with you. I love baseball. I love the game of baseball. I don't love free agency, and I don't love the hot stove. And I think that probably makes me a little bit of a fraud. I know how into it people are, and I want to definitely give a show that lends itself to that today. But I have just become tired, I think, from the way that we do the hot stove now. It's constant, it's speculative, it's Twitter, constant refresh. I don't love it at my old age of 39. I don't know what happened, Anthony. I used to love the hot stove, and I'm trying to wake me up in Florida, man.
I'll tell you what, Bob. You know what? I think it's kind of morphed into something different than what it was even just a few years ago, in the sense that, when you look at sports and you have your national reporters, right? They're usually breaking news that's happening or about to happen. Every once in a while you hear a speculative thing, but for the most part it's okay. If Adam Schefter is reporting something on the NFL, it's happening, right? Shams is doing it for basketball, it's happening, right? So, but for baseball, it's now become purely speculative 90% of the time, and 10% of the time actually reporting something that's happening, whether it's a signing or a trade. And I think that wears on you a little bit. Like, do I really need to know every freaking rumor that's out there, or do I just check in with me?
I can appreciate that the appetite for constant updates and those rumors, and some people love it, and it's part of the process of being a fan, and I totally get it. I think where I've begun to sour, and I hope this doesn't come across as jealous, because it's just not at all. In case also, if you don't know, I'm out of like the beat reporting game, at least for the time being, by choice. And look, like a guy like John Heyman, is he good at what he does, and is his visibility significant? And would I do the same thing as him if I had the level of access or the level of connections, especially to a specific agent that John Heyman does? Yeah, like, I'm not hating on John Heyman, but like, he has crafted a really interesting thing here in the offseason now. It's go on every podcast, go on every radio hit, mention a player, connect 8 teams to that player, some of which is legit, some of which is a total stretch, just to draw in those fan bases for that engagement and those retweets. And like, the whole thing, it's just like, I feel like what it's become is more like a look at me for certain mouthpieces across the industry than it is really gathering real information and providing it to the fans. That's what I think.
Look, as someone who does this on a local level in hockey, right? I mean, I've put stuff out that are conversations that the Flyers are having that they ultimately ends up not being a signing or ends up not being a trade, because I get that information. So I understand that a little bit, right? I do get it, but I also will say that for every one that I put out there, there are probably 7 or 8 that I've heard that I don't put out there. And so I think it's about moderating it a little bit, right? Like, you don't have to give me every potential possible rumor, every potential team who's called to check in on a player. Like, I don't need all of that. Yeah. If something gets to the stage where, hey, we're actually serious here, and we don't know if we're going to get this done or not, but we're serious about trying to get this player or trying to trade this player to another team, then fine, then report it. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But I don't need to hear these 8 teams checked in on this player, to see if they're interested in them. Like, the Nolan Arenado thing, I ended up writing it on Patterson the other night. It's like, well, there are 6 teams that are interested in Arenado. Well, are they really interested in Arenado? Yeah. Or do they just check in with the Cardinals to say, hey, what's the deal there? Yeah. Like, that's the thing. Like, I think in baseball, we've probably taken it too far down that speculative route.
Well, there are things to talk about. Some of the things that have happened, some of the things that have not happened. And I guess let's try to sort through all of that. And I'll start by saying this. You get to October and the way that the Phillies go out, and really the way the last 3 months of the season played out, it was underwhelming. And they sort of limped to the finish line, and then they weren't able to flip the switch. Like, we all know the deal. We all lived it. I do think at the end of that season, there was a real need for change and a real desire to shake things up. Like, hey, it hasn't worked here now the last couple of years. It feels like they're going in the wrong direction. Yes, this is a good team, but man, I'd really like to see them strip apart 2, 3, 4 pieces. I spoke about my desire to see that happen and that I think that it should happen. But there's obviously a lot that goes into that. Like, you can identify certain players and say it would be good if we could move them, but you have to find market value for them. You have to want that market value back in return. And I think that to a degree, that's what you're seeing with a player like Alec Boehm. I think Alec Boehm should be traded. I think that they probably would be best served if they were able to move off of him. I don't think he's going to be a long-term piece here. And if there was an interesting return that you could get for him, I think that's something you should explore. So my first question to you is about the need to shake it up, and then we'll talk about what's really happening here. But do you still feel like 2 months later, there's a real need to shake up the parts of this team?
It depends on how you – yes, the answer is yes, but it depends on how you're asking that question. Are you asking that question from an actual look at the team's ability to succeed with what they have on their roster versus – what's the optics of not changing the roster? Like because I think that the answers are slightly different.
Well, I think you should address it from both points. I mean, I would
Yeah.
say that right now, are the Phillies a playoff team as it stands today? Yeah, like probably. Are they like an 88 win team? Probably. I don't think they win the division. Are they there though? Like, yeah. I mean, I think that people need to understand. Obviously, like, this is still a good team. It has a lot of postseason experience. Some of it not great. It's not like you're in danger of winning 70. I mean, anything can happen, but it just doesn't look like a 78 win team that needs to make a huge move to even be a factor.
Right.
That being said, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I like, from that perspective, from a roster building perspective, like, yeah, you could tinker with what you have and, add along the margins and still have a playoff team that has a chance to win. Just like you have in the past 3 seasons. I do think there needs to be change because I think that there are issues with the lineup as it's currently constructed. But at the same time, even if they don't, you might be upset about it. But like, okay, well, they're going to go to war with the same, the same guys, and they'll probably still be there in the end, competing for this thing. But from an optics perspective, you cannot in any way, shape, or form run it back again with this team because you've gotten diminishing return over the last 3 seasons with this group. And there's, you go into a 4th season with that group and tell fans just trust us. It's going to be better this time. Like 22 was exciting because it came out of nowhere. 23, we all kind of thought that was going to be the year, and then they gagged it at the end against Arizona. When they decided to run it back last year, it was like, okay, benefit of the doubt. You had a bad few games against the Diamondbacks in October, but you're going to make up for it now. And then you kind of fell apart at the end of the year. I don't think that the city accepts that coming back again next year.
So what does that look like, though? Does that look like declining attendance? Does that look like people turning into Sixers fans? Some Sixers fans would say, like, call me in April, like, get us to the playoffs and then we'll talk. Like, I'm just not going to buy in. I'm not along for the ride. And wow, it's Marsh and, it's Brandon and Bryson and they're dumping seeds on someone. Like, are we just all over all of that now? Or like, what does that mean? Like, that they need to change the optics of it?
So I don't think I see, that's the thing. Like, I don't think it will impact attendance. I think that good baseball in this town, because it's an event to go to Citizens Bank Park, and even if you're not a fan, even if you're more of a casual fan, it's just kind of cool to go sit down at the ballpark on a summer night and have a couple beers and watch a game, right? I mean, so that's kind of the thing. So I don't think it will impact attendance by any stretch of the imagination. But do I think that the leash that the fans have on their support of the team is shortened considerably? Yes, I do. And that we've talked in the past about how we treat baseball like football in the sense that, every game is, do or die, and it shouldn't be. But I think that even gets up to a higher level. And I wonder what kind of public pressure that puts onto the team that is actually getting a little bit older too, right? I mean, that's part of it as well. I just don't think it's a good marriage at that point.
I don't disagree with you. I think this team really does need to do something of significance, as much as Dave Dombrowski. And I do think one thing people need to understand, and I totally get why people are frustrated by the way that things have been messaged from the Phillies so far this offseason. Like, if we don't, we don't. It has almost that vibe to it, right? Like, we're looking into it. We feel comfortable with what we have. It doesn't really behoove Dave Dombrowski or Rob Thompson, who was on MLB Network a couple of days ago, saying, like, we checked in with Alec. We told him that we're not really trying to trade him. Obviously, we're going to have conversations. That's just the way it is. He gets it. Okay. I don't expect the Phillies to come out and say, we have problems. Like, we do know that we're going in the wrong direction. We have to trade one of these pieces. We have to go out and sign a guy. We know. You're not really helping yourself by doing that. But at the same time, it's been a frustrating go of it here for Phillies fans. I mean, and it's funny to say that as a team that was in the World Series 2 years ago, kind of out of nowhere, a team that made a good push in 23, a team that won 95 games last year. Like, obviously, the Phillies have done a lot of winning. They're not the they're not the Pirates, but I look at it and say, like, this fan base is smart. They know the deal. To come out and say everything's okay, like, we love where we're at. Like, while I understand it, like, can we like find a way to maybe change the message so we're being a little bit more real about it, And you look at what they've done so far. Now let's talk about what's happened this offseason and why the Phillies haven't really made a big change or something that really shakes things up here. Let's start with Juan Soto, right? Juan Soto, we can talk ourselves into, that's too much money. He's not that good. Like, we could do that whole thing. I guess for me, I look at it, Steve Cohen was never going to be outbid for Juan Soto, right? Like, if the Phillies came in at 805, where do you think Steve Cohen was going to go? You think he was going to get outbid by the Phillies? Like, he would just keep going, right? And that's not to give the Phillies an out for never really truly engaging in what's going on. And you can sit here and say, well, it's not my money. I don't care. Figure it out. But the problem is that John Middleton, though he spends money, is not going to spend an infinite amount of money. So do you really want that allocation of money that long-term to that guy when it's probably going to hamstring you in a variety of different ways moving forward? And I think that is a fair consideration when you think about where they're at and why they really didn't engage with Juan Soto.
Yeah, and they got the impression, I think, pretty early on. They have a very good relationship with Scott Boras, and they probably talked to him, and Boras probably indicated that, hey, privately indicated that he wants to stay in New York, whether it's the Yankees or the Mets. This is where he wants to be. So the Phillies probably looked at it and said, is it really even worth getting involved in that conversation when we know? And that's why Middleton said, I don't mind being a stalking horse, but at the same time, Juan Soto wants to be in New York. I mean, when he said that a couple weeks ago, I mean, that's all you need to know.
I think when you have that type of relationship with Boras and the amount of deals that you've done with him and the respect that Boras seemingly has for the Phillies organization and their general willingness to spend, I think is a courtesy to them. You go, here's the deal, Yeah. And if you're the Phillies, you don't want – I think you run some risk by saying, yeah, we're all in on Juan Soto. We're going to try our asses off, and then you don't get him, and then the fans get really pissed. It's almost better – it's like a kid on Christmas, 3 weeks beforehand saying, like, I want a gorilla. And you're like, well, hey, Timmy, like, don't get your hopes up. We're not going to be able to get you a gorilla this Christmas, or like, I want a unicorn. Well, Sally, like we can't. It's not real.
Can't quite make that happen. The one thing though that I thought was interesting, and I told you this yesterday, Ant Jr. and I were talking about it, and he said what they should have done though at least was make pretend that they were interested just to drive the Mets price up. Because like you said, you knew Steve Cohen wasn't going to be outbid for him. All of a sudden, your division rival kind of gets in the mix and starts talking a similar number. Not to say that
that makes sense to me, but don't the Yankees kind of work in that mechanism? Like, isn't the pressure that the Yankees – because, I mean, the Yankees are the big loser here in the Juan Soto sweepstakes and everything that it represents. Not only does this player, who's a generational talent, go across town – you haven't won the World Series in a long time, and it's almost like this shift. It feels like a shift up there. Like, Yankees fans are upset, not just because Juan Soto left, but because they lost him to the Mets. So I feel like that the Yankees probably applied as much economic pressure in this situation as a team possibly could. I guess maybe the Phillies could have gotten in there and been like, we'll call your bluff. Here's 800. Let's see if we can get Cohen to go up to 40 million. But then at the end of the day, you're talking about a guy whose net worth is what, $20 billion? Does that $40 million really make a difference in how he's going to operate moving forward? Like, I don't know. Maybe the answer to that is yes, but I don't think that this fundamentally changes the Phillies' near-term ability to compete for a division or win a World Series.
No, I think you're spot on with that, right? And and even if the Mets say, if Cohen goes, I'm out, and you're stuck with an $800 million player, the one thing you can kind of could have taken solace in is the fact that there's those opt-outs. He does have an opt-out after 5 years, and at that point you could have sat there and reassessed your investment and say, okay, because obviously he's going to take the opt-out unless the Mets give him a raise, in which case that could wipe out the opt-out, that whole thing. You could have reassessed. So, I mean, regardless, I mean, I think that I think that what the Phillies did was fine. I don't have a problem with them not really pursuing Soto. It was just an interesting thought that Anthony brought to my attention. But it's kind of left them in a situation now where, you just lost to the Mets in the playoffs. They're obviously going to be better, right, than they were a year ago. Probably.
You would think.
You would think. I mean, there's something. They got a lot going out too. The Mets.
I would have thought the Phillies would have been better when they handed Trey Turner a $300 million contract, and it didn't exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that the Mets
they got.
You think that they'll be better. The Braves are gonna, they're getting guys back. I mean, you're gonna have a full year of Acuna, probably a half year of Strider. He'll come back by mid-season.
Those are all interesting questions. Like, does Acuna come back and look like Acuna? I mean, we've seen him come back from serious injury before and be that guy, but does he look like that immediately? And does he look like that in 2025? What does Spencer Strider look like when he comes back? What does Max Fried look? I mean, he's not there. So, like, how are you confident that you have the ability to replace him? There's obviously question marks that you talk about as you get closer to the season. But I mean, I think where you're going with this is that the Phillies are not nearly in as good of a position right now as they were, in the postseason in 23, where it looked like it was theirs to have. And for the first 3 months of 24, it certainly looked like there was nobody that could sniff them. And now you're back to where we spent a lot of time in recent years, which is they'll compete. And, if things break right, maybe they make a trade at the deadline. Like, are we doing this again? Is this what we're going to do?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's December the 12th, and I'm not making any predictions on the division, but you can just as easily say the Phillies could finish third in this division in 25 as you could say that they'll win the division again and defend their crown, right? I mean, it's no longer a 2-horse race. It's a 3-horse race now.
Yeah, they have currently the third best odds to win the division. It's pretty tight between the Braves, Mets, and Phillies. And what's interesting is if you look at the World Series odds right now, there's 5 teams, and you have the Mets, Braves, and Phillies are 3 of the top 5 teams with the best odds to win the World Series. So you are in a hyper-concentrated, ultra-competitive division here.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And so when you look at the Phillies and say, okay, well, what are they doing? What's the big moves they're making? And there's still time. Of course, it's like I said, December 12th. But they came away from the winter meetings with one player. And the quote from Dave Dombrowski yesterday at the end, when he says, I would have liked to have done a little bit more, doesn't really send positive vibes through how you should feel about it.
And what it highlights is that it's not just the Phillies sitting here saying we're good. It's other things have to fall into place. Things that you can't control have to fall into place for these things to get done, whether it's a team's willingness to take on an asset and trade back the one that you want, whether it's a free agent deciding, hey, I want to go to this team. I want to be a part of this at this money. And that is, to me, what the concern is, because I don't think the Phillies are stupid. I don't think the Phillies said, ho, hum, but we won 95 games. The Phillies know that they were totally average team for 3 months and played a pathetic series in New York. There is a clear to me anyway, I think it's ultra obvious that they want to do things. It's concerning, though, as you said, that you exit the winter meetings. And to me, you need another outfielder. I think you need another bullpen piece. I know that Dave Dombrowski said they're comfortable with their bullpen. I call bullshit. They certainly need a 5th starter. I know that Painter slots in here and is a factor, but right now Taijuan Walker is in your plan. Like he would if the season started today, probably have to pitch for you. That's not it. They have things they have to do here, man.
And then you have the question marks of the guys who are in your lineup, and say, all right, they regressed last year or whatever. Have they peaked? And what can we expect more out of them next season? All right, so we learned since we've last recorded an episode a couple months ago that Bryson Stott played most of the season with an elbow injury. And so maybe that's why he had a hard time getting around on fastballs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe. But I need to see it. I need to see that he can be back to the 23 version of himself now that he's going to be healthy going into the 25 season. I'd like to think that he will be, but there's no guarantee of that. Brandon Marsh is going to probably be your everyday center fielder or majority center fielder. He's not great defensively out there to begin with. B, he's got to be better than he was last year as far
Yeah, I
as
mean,
the
there's
strikeout
no,
rate.
what's the excuse there, right? Like you said, if you go around the diamond right now, it's like who's going to have a better 25 than they had at 24? And like you go, okay, Bryce Harper, he obviously was battling injuries. There were power outages throughout the course of the season. I think you're in a world though with Bryce where at some point he's going to be banged up again. Like I think what you saw last year from Bryce Harper in a lot of ways is what Bryce Harper is going to be. Like he'll be out there, he's going to play through stuff. His effectiveness is probably going to be diminished at times. Like I don't think you're living in a world, even if he's playing first base, where you just see Bryce Harper for $162 and hits 49 home runs. And like I think what you see is what you get. Like still an awesome player, impact player, but I can't just pencil in Bryce Harper for a better season in 25. I don't know that.
Yeah. No, you're 1,000% right.
Trey Turner going to be better. I mean, certainly feels like Trey Turner is what he is right now. He is what he is defensively. This is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Offensively, yeah, like, he had his moments. There were times last year where you're like, damn, this guy is a true difference maker. And then he goes ice cold. Like, is this just what he is? Does he have more? You know, I think Alec Bohm is what he is. I don't think there's any more to him. Real Muto, no way. Like
I think some of these guys, and Turner's one for an example, has to take the same approach that Kyle Schwarber took going into 24, which was, I know I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of something that I do really well, but it's going to make me better all the way around.
Right.
And that's really the truth. I mean, when you look at what see how his season finished, his numbers were very good in comparison to 23 and 22 when he hit 48, whatever it was, 40 some home runs, 47 home runs each season. Yes, the home runs were down, but he still drove in 100 runs. He still walked 100 times. He still scored 100 runs, and he hit 240, whatever he hit, right? Like his average jumped by 45 points. Like that's just making a change to be better for yourself and for your team. I think other players have to follow in those footsteps if they're going to be in this lineup again. But the reality of it is, Bob, there are holes. You mentioned them. We all know what they are. One of the ones that they tried to fill, and this is an interesting thing, and I'm a little surprised right now as to how this has kind of played out. They signed Jordan Romano, and I don't dislike the signing. I think it's a good flyer to take. He didn't have like a major elbow injury. He had an impingement. You need to clean out some loose bodies. He's been throwing for a while, like towards the end of the season. There was a hint that maybe if the Blue Jays made the playoffs, he could possibly throw then. He said on the call the other day that he probably wasn't going to happen, but he was at least close enough that it was in the conversation. So he's far enough removed from the injury and when it happened back in May.
I think there were some reports that they saw a video of him throwing, and then they did the medicals, and it all kind of
so. And when you look at him from 21 to 23, certainly one of the best closers in baseball. So to take a 1-year flyer on him for maximum $9 million with the bonuses and incentives built in, that to me is fine. Like in a vacuum, that move is totally fine.
I'll take it a step further. A couple things I like about this guy, because I'm going to tell you what I don't like about it in a minute.
Yeah.
And you might be meeting me there as well. Like, look, you go from 2021 to 2023, so it saved a total of 95 games, right? So he's got the late inning experience. He knows how to close out games. I do think that there's something to be said for that. I think there's value in that. I also like that he's good against both righties and lefties. In fact, if you look at him overall, his numbers are better against lefties, both in batting average, slugging, OPS, than they are against righties. And across the board, he's good against both. So I like the flexibility that he brings to the table. Like, I think that he is an intriguing, I don't want to say he's a buy low piece, but he's definitely a value play here on a short-term deal, not a ton of risk. My problem is that they do the deal and then it's like, well, the message that they've wanted to convey is that this replaces Estevez and Hoffman. I'm like, it does?
Yeah.
Like a kind of like a flyer, like with some upside, a guy that's established, who I think will come in and do an okay job. But like, we're just absolutely certain that he's going to replace what Jeff Hoffman was to this team for the last 2 seasons. And then try to tell me that you like the back end of your bullpen mix. We like Matt Strahm. We like Romano. We like Alvarado. We like Kerkering. We think Kerkering's going to take another step forward. I can even go for that to a degree. But like, you're gonna put Jose Alvarado in that mix, a guy that you were scared to death to use in an important situation in October, a guy who was totally underwhelming for the vast majority of the season. I like Jose Alvarado, and I'm not saying that you kick him to the curb and that he's done, but you're just assuming that all of a sudden he's going to be what you hope he's going to be again. To me, like they have work to do here. There has got to be another guy added to this mix.
Yeah, it's a lot of finger crossing, right? I mean, it really, like, can you see what they're saying? Sure, I can see what they're saying. Do I believe it? No, because I don't think bullpens are volatile from year to year, and more than any other position. And so you look at it and go, okay, we have an inconsistent Alvarado. We have a young and up and coming, but still hasn't completely proven it Kirkering. Matt Strahm was great last year, but he did kind of fall off a little bit. I mean, he wasn't, bad at down the stretch by any stretch of the imagination, but post All-Star game was not quite the guy he was pre-All-Star game. And now you're bringing in a guy coming off of an elbow injury that didn't pitch since May. And you're going to say, these are our 4 hammers in the back of the bullpen.
Yeah,
I'm a little concerned about that.
We like Tanner Banks and Jose Ruiz.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever.
That's where I think my concern definitely comes into play. I really am surprised. I mean, I guess we'll see with Jeff Hoffman. It certainly does not feel like in this moment, maybe I'm reading it wrong. It doesn't feel like in this moment that it's looking great between the Phillies and Hoffman. You saw yesterday, he has his Instagram story and he's got the, whatever the
hourglass,
underneath his picture. I guess I'm surprised. We've spoken to him. I think that he certainly likes being here. I think he probably wants to be here. I don't know. Is it just a total overvaluation of himself and what he's worth? That is why this has not happened. Is it the Phillies just kind of saying like, look, like we have a very, what we think is fair number. We are not going to go above it for you. We're just not going to do it.
And I think it's more that, Bob, because I get the sense he's probably going to get something close to what Clay Holmes got from the Mets, 3 years, and that 12 and a half a year kind of thing. Like, I think that.
Is he worth that?
Well, that's the question, right? Like, maybe the Phillies look at it and say, we don't think he's worth that. We think he's worth a little bit less than that. And maybe Jeff Hoffman looks at it and says,
not like guys. Like I tend to go like, yeah, I'm good on that. I don't know, man. I am very aware of how bad he was against the Mets in the playoffs, and he was not perfect down the stretch either. Sometimes I think that there's a comfort, a fit. A guy finds himself. He's gotten a lot of big outs for this team. He's tough as shit. He stayed pretty healthy. Like, I don't know. I'm surprised that a deal is not done with him, or that it was not a priority where they were maybe willing to extend beyond. And now we'll see how it plays out. Maybe they do come to a conclusion where they can work it out. Maybe he gets a deal that when I see it, I go, no way. Like, best of luck, Jeff. Like, you got the bag. Good for you. But I don't blame the Phillies. I guess just right now, all I can say is I'm a little bit surprised that this is where we're at.
I am too. I really am. And because as much as I thought that the bullpen was a strength last year, it melted down against the Mets, but it was a significant strength for that team for the entirety of the season. I look at it right now and go, I'm not sure. I'm not sure about this in 25.
Yeah, and as far as like Estevez goes, like, see ya. Like, I mean, not that he was terrible, but like that's not a guy that I need to re-engage. I like guys that can miss bats. He can't. You saw that in the playoffs. Like, there's just limitations there, and he pitched well above his head for a few months.
And listen, I don't mind if they want to go get another 1-year guy, like if that's what it takes, because you don't want to. I get you have a lot of money invested in certain guys, and you don't want to start making long-term deals for relief pitchers because it's, like I said, it's so volatile. You want to go out and sign Kirby Yates to a 1-year deal? Go ahead. Like, I'm cool with that. Like, or something, Kenley Jansen, like whatever. You want to give one of these veteran arms in the back end of a bullpen a 1-year deal, similar $9 million kind of thing. I'm okay with it. At least that gives you a little bit of a semblance of a bullpen for 2025 that you can feel a little bit more comfortable in. It doesn't have to be that $36 million for 3 years. I don't know. I just think that I think that something else does have to happen. You cannot be happy with this bullpen going into the start of the year.
All right, there's a couple other guys out there that the Phillies are sort of linked to or have openly even expressed interest in, one being Roki Sasaki. Look, a little bit different than the Yamamoto situation a year ago. He gets $325 million from the Dodgers. There were reports that the Phillies outbid the Dodgers to get his services last year. And then certainly, he opted to play in LA. It's a closer flight back home, all that, and players just tend to go West Coast. We've gotten indications that may not be the case here, that it may not have to be the Padres or the Mariners or the Dodgers, and that maybe even a smaller market or a mid-market team could be in play. Just so that we're aware here, it really does not come down to financials. It really is about a team just making a presentation and then the player saying, okay, I believe in this organization or I feel comfortable here. This is where I want to set up shop. And the reason being is that the signing has to go through international bonus pool money. And so the way that this is done is he has actually a window, I believe, through Sunday that he could sign with a team, but it would be based on 2024's international bonus pool money, which there's not much left. So he's not going to do that. He's going to wait until the 25 window opens up in the middle of January, at which point the money resets and he can get a little bit more upfront. Thing being is that each team, obviously, they have their own allotment of bonus pool money. The Phillies are sort of in the middle of the pack. They have a little over $6 million. Some of the upper echelon teams have a little over $7.5 million. So the financials here are not going to be what swings this deal. Dave Dombrowski said, yeah, we would love to pair up a guy like Sasaki with Painter for years to come. It would be awesome. So yeah, the Phillies are going to be interested because in part, the financials aren't going to be insane. Do you think that there's really any chance in hell that the Phillies could land this guy?
No, I don't. Only because I think that he's going to end up on the West Coast too. The Dodgers are going to pitch. You can play with Ohtani and Yamamoto and just be here.
Our farm system's awesome. We're going to be good every year that you're here for the rest of your life. We're closer to your home. We have Ohtani. We have Yamamoto. We just won the World Series. I mean,
like there's everything there, and so to me it's like maybe they get an audience with him. Maybe he gets he says, okay, the Phillies, you're in the mix, but I don't think it goes beyond that. If it does, I'd be stunned. And the one little notion is you mentioned that like even maybe a mid-market team might have a chance. Is apparently his agent Joel Wolf talked about this out at the winter meetings that. Apparently, the Japanese media in Japan, not the ones who travel around in the majors, have been really hard on him because he's choosing to go to the MLB early, and they view that in Japan as like a sign of disrespect. And so he's not mentally not handled that well, and so maybe he doesn't want to go to a market where he's going to be under a lot of media scrutiny. That doesn't help for here, but I think
one question about him because I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've watched any more than some YouTube clips, right?
Right.
There is some stuff out there that he had topped out previously 102 mile an hour fastball. Like last year, his splitter was awesome, a lot of weak contact, ground balls. He had a 40% whiff rate on his slider. Like he's got a premium 3-pitch arsenal, but he did have a velocity dip across the entirety of it last year. And I do wonder at 23 if he's coming over early. Like, is there anything does he feel like I gotta go now, or is he in decline at 20? With that being the case, with not having to commit $350 million to him instantly, I don't think he has anything to worry about. But it is interesting. Why is he here so early? And why is he doing it at what is a significant discount off the bat? I mean, obviously, if he's successful, he's going to get paid. But I guess it is interesting, and I don't know. Honestly, I just don't know enough about it to know why is this different.
No, you're right. It's a great question, and all he had to do is wait 2 more years, and then he could get Yamamoto money. Pitch 2 more years in Japan, and then he could get it. But it's his dream to pitch in Major League Baseball. He wants to get over here as soon as possible, and he's willing to
get himself acclimated. And
yeah.
Well, I guess there's two different ways we can go about the remainder of the show. Do you want to talk about the pipe dream, or do you want to talk about, going dumpster diving here?
We got a couple things that I wanted to kind of get into real quick. We don't have to dwell on them.
Okay.
But Garrett Crochet gets traded to the Red Sox. The Phillies were linked to him since July, right? We talked about him on this show back at the deadline. They were really hard into it. Matt Gelb reported yesterday that in July the offer ended up getting right up until the deadline, like an hour beforehand. They finally offered both Justin Crawford and Aiden Miller for Crochet. The White Sox still said no. Yeah. Obviously, the White Sox wanted Painter, which was a non-starter for the Phillies. But here at the winter meetings, the Phillies did not offer both those guys, and their rationale was, we now only are guaranteed 2 possible postseasons with them as opposed to 3. And so because of that one less half season of Garrett Crochet, they weren't willing to trade 2 of their top prospects. So I asked you, Bob, just as a follow-up, Dombrowski talked about also about how the window might be closing on the veteran group of this team, but that for the Phillies to remain competitive going forward, they need a lot of these young players to come in and start to hit. When I mean hit as in be good, not hit as in hit at the plate, although for the position players that would be the case. Would you have still gone ahead and given up 2 of your top 3 prospects to get 2 years of Garrett Crochet?
I struggle with this, and the reason being is we all know what the Phillies' weakness is, and it's plate discipline. It's a lineup that is too similar in too many ways. And so, to me, if you're going to ideally use those assets and it's going to hurt, I want something that's going to change the lineup, that's going to change the offense, because I still have a reasonable degree of confidence in the starting rotation with the addition of Painter coming into the mix. And I understand that Ranger Suarez I don't think he's going to be a long-term solution here. I think Aaron Nola at this point, no knock on him, he profiles more as a number 3 starter. I just do. You can always use more pitching. Bringing Garrett Crochet into this mix is probably the one move that you could have made this winter that makes you instantly elite in one facet of the game. Like, you get Garrett Crochet and you have the best starting rotation in baseball, period. It's not up for debate. Like, that is your strength. You probably deal with the offensive inconsistencies. You get to October and say, good luck, guys. Good luck with Wheeler. Good luck with Crochet. Good luck with Nola. And maybe Painter. And I get that. And I don't hate it. But to me, if you're gonna take that pain on the prospect front, I would want it to be for an everyday guy. I just feel like they have more solutions. This is something I say, and I know that this could be pretty tricky, but I feel like there's more solutions to solve the rotation, at least in the short term, than there are solutions for this lineup right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Look, I like Garrett Crochet a lot. I think he would have been a nice addition, like you said. It would, slotting into that right behind Wheeler into the rotation.
And you can't make the mistake of saying, well, look what happened against the Mets. They got good starting pitching.
Yeah.
Like, just because you got good starting pitching for a couple of games in New York against New York this past October and you didn't win, like, you can't just say that's the reason in 25 that they're okay or that they're not okay. Like, you can't just focus on those games. But, they also had to get up relievers 8 times when Ranger Suarez pitched. And maybe if you had a guy that just went 6 and blew the doors off the team, you wouldn't have been in that spot you were late in the game with, Hoffman having been up a couple times. It might have been a different game.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. But I kind of agree with you that if you're going to give up your best prospects, it should be for somebody who's playing every day.
Yeah.
Should be for somebody who's playing every
day. I think the real question is, are those prospects going to hit? Are they going to land? Are they guys that are going to keep the Phillies window open as some of these veterans exit? And, or are they just trying to save the chips for the right player, the right situation, whether that be this winter or maybe in the middle of the summer? That's what I'm kind of curious about. Like, how much trust do they have that Aiden Miller could be an all-star caliber player, or that Crawford could be an all-star caliber player? Is there willingness to include those players? A signal that maybe they don't think that they're really franchise-altering types of prospects, or was it just the acknowledgement that to get a guy like Garrett Crochet, we're really willing to take the hurt?
Yeah, and you might be right. I mean, maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe it's maybe one of them they look at and say, oh, that guy's going to be a star player, but we understand we have to kind of give up something to get something.
Yeah.
And we look at the other one and we say, maybe not, maybe he doesn't translate as well, whatever. But the fact that they're absolutely refusing to talk trading Andrew Painter tells you what they think of him.
Well, then let's talk about another big name player that has some trade whispers around them, and the Phillies at least loosely attached. You got Kyle Tucker sitting out there, and it certainly feels like that he is probably going to be moved, at least in this moment. It feels like there's some buzz around it, that it's likely to occur. He's going to be a free agent after the 2025 season. He's set to make about $17 million this year. I saw that Ruben Amaro. I wish I could find the tweet. I'm trying to find the tweet in real time. He was on MLB Network and had a proposed trade between the Phillies and the Astros for Kyle Tucker. And I don't think it was particularly realistic. And unfortunately, here we go. Thank you. Alec Boehm, Nick Castellanos, Mick Abel, or Starlin Caba. And in return, the Phillies get Kyle Tucker and Ryan Presley. This was one of these things that when I saw it, I actually was wondering if it was real or if it was like the internet, like trying to be funny. The Astros aren't going to do that deal.
No, they're not. They're not. The thing of it is, God bless the former general manager there with that suggestion. But the Astros, if they move Tucker, and I think you're going to, they have said that they don't look at this as like a tear down. They still want to be competitive. So they want MLB caliber players in return. It's not like they're looking for prospects, right? I mean, maybe give them one or, mid-range prospect as part of the trade, but they want major league caliber players. So I think in structure, Ruben's got the right idea.
Yes.
But there's no way Houston takes that deal. There's just no way. You would have to give up better.
So what is the deal? Like, let's just, for the sake of argument, say that Alec Boehm's included in it. Is it Alec Boehm, Ranger Suarez, Justin Crawford?
Probably.
Like, to me, that's more like realistic. I mean, anytime that you do hypothetical trades, you can either be close or sound like a total moron. To me, it's like, okay, capable major league infielder who could sniff 300 and maybe hit 50 doubles, and like Alec Boehm's a useful player. Ranger Suarez gives your rotation some depth. He can get some, I don't know if they would be interested in him long term, whatever. I feel like there's got to be a prospect with real upside in there, and Starlin Caba, by the way, is like a legitimate prospect. I'm not, yeah. And like, so when I say that Ruben's proposal is kind of silly, and I think it is, you're right. Like, structurally, it makes some sense. I just don't know that. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know how other evaluators feel about the Phillies prospects. Maybe there are evaluators out there that Ruben's talked to that feel like that Caba actually has a little bit more intrigue than a guy like Crawford does. I don't know. Sitting where I'm sitting, that feels light. I think it's going to happen.
Positionally, he probably does have a little bit more cachet.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about an all-world defensive shortstop. Probably means a lot more than a speedy outfielder.
It just feels like to me, like the Abel thing is the one that I look at and go, like, come on, dude. Like, yeah, I think it's not Abel or Caba. It's very highly regarded prospect plus, yes. I think is what you're looking at. The question is, do you do that? Because, look, Kyle Tucker's going to be a free agent. He's not going to get Juan Soto money, but he's going to be 29 years old when he's a free agent. He's highly productive. He's going to get paid. He's probably not going to sign a deal with a team prior to hitting free agency. You're going to have to compete with a number of suitors. So is paying that price for 1 year of Kyle Tucker worth it? And I don't think, based on how the Phillies have operated in recent years, that that's something that they're going to engage in. That feels like a lot to give up for a guy that you're only going to get 1 year of. You tell me.
No, I agree with you. To me, I only would make a deal for Kyle Tucker if I knew that I could, like, knowing what you have to give up for him, right? Because, like, the Astros still want to compete, so they want real talent in return. I'm only making that deal if Tucker's willing to sign beyond the year.
What was he going to get? He's going to get, I mean, based on what we just saw with Soto, I know that there's not another $700 million plus contract in the pipeline here, but
well, he's 3 years older, not
3
as
years older,
not
but
as,
like am I crazy to think that we're not talking 250 plus for this guy?
Oh, sure. Well, I think
plus?
you're probably talking 300 million.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily know if he's going to get 10 years, 11 years, 12 years. I mean, it might be shorter. And so maybe you don't get to the 300 million. Maybe it's 8 years.
I mean,
right?
Think about this. From 2021 to 2023, he hit 30, 30, and 29 homers. He only played 78 games last year. He hit 23 homers in 78 games. So you're talking about, if you were to extrapolate that out over 162, about 45 home runs, which is a significant increase in his power numbers. His OPS was just shy of 1,000 last year. And the thing about him is, like, you can talk about lefty, righty, and do you want another lefty? He has not struck out 100 times in any season of his career. Yeah. The Phillies had 5 players strike out at least 100 times last year. Yeah. And by the way, had Bryson Stott started the way that we thought he was going to, he would have struck out over 100 times. And Trey Turner would have struck out well over 150. Like, the Phillies basically fielded 7 of their 9 everyday guys last year. Big time strikeout problems. And, you would have a guy that has some plate discipline, has the ceiling. To me, like, holy shit, you talk about changing the feel of a team. This is the move. But at what cost when you know that it's only for 1 year? And, man, like, that's a move where, like, you want to, like, that would get me perked up. Kyle Tucker running around out there next year, I'd say, like, this is a different team. This team's better now. Yeah. But I can't kill the Phillies for not doing that deal, because the reality is it's very unlikely that Kyle Tucker says, listen, if you give me 8 years, $300 million right now, I'll sign. Like, that's probably not realistic. So
correct.
You run that risk.
So where do they go, Bob? Where do they go? And if you're not doing that, right, where are they going? What are they doing? I
mean, maybe that's part of the reason why when you called and said, like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, I guess. I mean, like, I'm not super optimistic. I think we're headed to a situation where they're going to tack on a couple fringy type guys that could maybe help you win some baseball games. And I think you're going to look at it and see where they're at in July. And then we're going to talk about the deadline, and you're going to hope that Dombrowski steps up and does something big that he hasn't done the past few years. I mean, it sort of feels like that's where this is headed.
It does.
Do you have some outside the box solution here that, like, because I would love to hear it. Give the people some hope.
I don't. The only rumor that kind of snuck out at the end of the meetings was that the Phillies are interested in, ready for this one, drum roll, Patrick Sandoval to kind of be the number 5 starter.
Is he even going to be healthy next year? I thought he was kind of like a stash away guy because his arm blew up.
Yeah, well, it did. I do remember him being hurt last year. And he was non-tendered by the Angels, which was a little bit of a surprise, I thought. But they didn't want to, he's going to miss a lot of 25, because I think he had Tommy John I don't remember if it was in May. Maybe in May.
In the middle of the season. He made a decent amount of starts. I mean, so he pitched in 16 games last year. So
then he probably pitched into June then.
Yeah, I don't know that you even see him. I think that might be more of like a 26 play. And that's the thing. Like, that's the whole thing with the Phillies right now. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, being savvy and finding players on the margins for value, like, that's what builds a good team. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that when you're waiting for that seismic that seismic shift, that piece that's going to put you over the top after you've been knocking on the door the last few years, and you're reading about Jordan Romano and Patrick Sandoval. You're just like, God, it's hard to get fired up for that.
No, I agree, and I'm not sure what's left, like, for them to do, like, what's going to be out there. I don't know. I mean, there's still.
One other thing I wanted to just quickly touch on. I don't know if you have any other topics. If not, we can kind of shut it down after this. But there's this idea that Dave Dombrowski, he's like Hall of Fame exec, like he is known for making the big move. If there's a whale that he wants, he knows how to land. Like, is some of that working against him here? Like, it just feels like, or is it unfair? Is it unfair to have this expectation that he goes out and he impact bat, another starter? You got Soto, fuck you, we're going to find a way to beat you anyway. Like, that's what we all want as a fan base. That's what you want to see happen. Is it just kind of like unfair to expect that?
Well, I think that he's a little limited in the moment. Do I think the Phillies would go over that next tax threshold, which is the fourth tax threshold of, I think it's $301 million, at which point they would be taxed at 110% per dollar over? Like, that's a lot of tax, right? 110%. They would do it for the right player, but I don't think that they want to get there by adding pieces. You know what I'm saying?
Let me paint this situation then. Like, and so again, I wish, like, maybe I should give myself more credit and come on here and tell you how smart I am and how smart I think I am. But what I don't know is, what does this look like 2-3 years out? And if you are not necessarily getting nuts in this moment, what you're trying to do is keep that window open, right? So are they looking at it and saying right now, like, let's not make these investments for a team that has some flaws. Let's just, again, kind of play it by ear, get into it, see once the season starts if there's an opening, and then we can be aggressive and make our move to try to give ourselves the best chance in 24. But we still like our team. We still think we're pretty good. We still think we're a playoff team, so we don't have to do anything that's going to cripple us moving forward. Let's just kind of play both sides of it here in the short term, because by not doing that, when we get to 26, like, we still think that we're going to win with Bryce Harper, but the cast around Bryce Harper and probably Trey Turner, you know, it's going to be different. There's not going to be well, I guess what do we have? Another 2 years of Castellanos, 1 more year of Schwarber on the books. Is that right?
Schwarber and Real Muto come off after 25.
Right. And I don't know right now. I would have told you it was a slam dunk that Schwarber would be back on another deal. I think if it's 4 years plus, it probably won't be here. If I had to guess, Castellanos, maybe they are able to move away from him after this season because there's only 1 year, $20 million left. Maybe they won't want to. I don't know. Who knows, right? Point being, like, it's not going to be the same core of guys. All of this money comes off the books. They're probably going to bring in players of the same caliber, you know, star or just below a level of star players to surround with Bryce Harper. So are you just trying to keep yourself a little bit flexible for that next iteration of this? You know, and but I can't tell you that that's a terrible way to look at it.
We circle back, Bob, though, and say, how will this look optically? Yeah. That you're coming off of last year and you're basically saying we're going to throw the same team out there again.
Yeah.
Just because it's going to be better for us down the road.
The thing that makes that harder is that it wasn't like the past 2 years in that the team started slowly and that they built a ton of momentum down the stretch. They didn't play 30 games over 500 for the final 100 games of the season. It was the opposite. They were entirely mediocre, totally exposed, and could never figure out how to get over it or out of it. And I think that when you talk about optics and not doing anything, that's the bigger issue. It's not we finished the season on some high note, we got tired, we flamed out, or like we just didn't play our best that week. It was 3 months of totally uninspired baseball and then a big fart at the end. Yeah. And that is where the optical issue comes into play.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see because I don't necessarily know where they go next.
Yeah.
I still think.
Let me just say this. I mean, like, there's just a reality where, like, obviously you're trying to build the best team possible. You make the playoffs and all of that, but the truth is that you only get so many shots, and that they blew their 2 best shots, and now they might not get another one. And as much as
right.
everyone expects that move or that trade that's going to make them feel like they're that team again, and that they're going to get to October with a great opportunity, there's always a year where it's over. I mean, like, you know, I know it's like hyper local, but like, oh, it's the Eagles. It's 2000. It's, wow, we're in the playoffs again. Oh, we lost to the Rams, but we're coming. It all lines up in 2002. We blew it. It all lines up 2003. Westbrook gets hurt in a championship game. You blew it. Oh, we got to the Super Bowl. Like, and you think in 2005, well, like, oh, just run back. This team always makes the playoffs. They're a piece away. They're going to get back to the Super Bowl. Nope. And then it was over. And I don't think that that's what this is. I think that this team's run by smart people, and I think that they have the financial resources and all of those things. But so did the Eagles back then. Like, sometimes it's just over and you don't want to admit it. And I don't think it's over for this team, but in terms of like being the World Series or bust, like, hate to break it to everyone, but like, it's probably just not the reality of it anymore.
No, you're right. There's no question this is still a playoff team, and they will have a shot at it.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that they can't go in and like slay the Dragon in October. They've shown that they can beat better teams than them on paper in October.
They're not the favorite. They're not going to.
They won't be the favorite. They're not going in as the favorite, and they're not. I don't think positioned to do a deal or two that makes them the favorite. And,
right.
You know, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, we will. For one last thing, Bob, I want to throw something at you that is now 10 days old. And the story's kind of lost its luster a little bit, but I mean, you know, we didn't record last week, and when it would have been prevalent, and I would have been seething and through the roof when talk about it. But I just wanted to get your opinion on it.
Was it Golden Bat or whatever?
Yeah, we didn't have a chance to talk about the Golden Bat.
You want to set that up, or do you want me to just go?
Well, I mean, for those who, if you were living under a rock and don't know what the hell we're talking about, Rob Manfred, Major League Baseball commissioner, on his own kind of threw out that there's been some buzz about adding a golden at bat to Major League Baseball, which is something that they use in banana ball, in the Savannah Bananas, right? The Harlem Globetrotters of baseball, where at any time you can have any player come up, regardless of who's due up, once a game for like a key at bat. So if it was for the Phillies, if you want Bryce Harper to come up with a, you know, bases loaded in the 9th, even though he made the last out of the 8th inning, he could come back up even if it's not his spot in the lineup. But you're allowed to do it once a game. This is what he kind of threw out there. Take it away, Bob.
Well, I don't think you need to say anything else because we know where you're at on this. There's nobody that has listened to this show that thinks that you're about to say, and I like it. I mean, you know, look, I'm all for innovation, and I try not to be like the old school purist guy. Like, let's look at ideas if they make sense. Like, do I love the extra inning ghost runner rule? No. Do I think it's ruined the game? I don't. And I think that in terms of watchability and not, you know, you and I might love inning 15. Now, what are they going to do? But like, you know, the general public, it's probably a net positive for them.
Except they don't do it in the postseason. Why?
I know 3 batter minimum. I don't know. Like, you want to play matchup and burn out your bullpen in the 8th inning? Go ahead, do it. Like, so I tend to not like this stuff. And sometimes when these rules and changes get put into place, I don't think I'm going to like them. And then I'm like, hey, you know, not so bad. This is one where I just feel like, what is the end game? I don't like. Would it make the game more entertaining? Maybe like I could guess you could make that argument. Like, hey, it's the bottom of the 9th, and you know, coming up for the Phillies is Bryson Stott and Johan Rojas. No, but wait, here comes Bryce Harper. Like, and the crowd goes fucking crazy. Like, yeah, like, okay. I just think that at some point, like, you're making a joke of your game. And like you said, it's a Savannah Bananas thing. And is it interesting and is it fun? Like, yeah, for that, sure. You don't need to do it if you're Major League Baseball. It's not going to bring in more fans. It's not going to get you better TV contracts. People aren't going to come to the stadium because you have that rule in place. And all you're doing is just making a joke out of the history of your game. I don't get it. I hate it. That's where I land on it. I think
and
that's as fair as you can be about it.
And I'll tell you what, one other thing that you didn't even mention that I think would make people hate it even more. Because what would end up happening, Bob? Because the best players in baseball, the best hitters in baseball, still making out 70% of the time, right? They still are out 70% of the best players. All of a sudden, you're going to turn your superstars into less than superstar.
Yeah, you're right? I mean, seriously. Hey, Bryce, bail us out again, and he doesn't. And you're like, this guy's a bum.
That's exactly my point. It's supposed to, the whole notion of this is going to elevate your superstars and put them in these key moments. And the reality of it is it's going to make them worse.
This guy is 1 for 13 in golden at bats this year. This guy's a loser.
Exactly. So yeah, I
also
hate
like Rob Manfred being like, yeah, there's been a lot of buzz about it. Yeah, like there's been a lot of buzz about me being voted as People Magazine's best looking man of the year. Like, who wears the buzz? What buzz? I feel like that's Manfred like just throwing it out there and be like, nibble on this. I'll be back in 5 years. We're probably going to shove it down your throat.
Yeah, I don't know. God forbid. I said believe it or not, we talked about this on Snow the Goalie a little bit. And I honestly said this, and I stand by this. If they brought that into Major League Baseball, I would stop watching Major League Baseball. That would be the tipping point for me. I could deal with some of the other things that they changed the game that I love. I can survive those. That would be my.
What if in the 10th inning of a tie game they put a tarp on the field and they drop a cage over the pitcher's mound, and they put both managers in there, and they have to fight to the death. And once the opposing manager's dead, that team claims victory. Like that would be entertaining. That would get the fans fucking fired up.
Gladiator the shit out of baseball.
That's what we need to do. Let's go. Like, I mean, at some point, like, yeah, you could say like this is entertaining. Also, does it make any sense? No. So there's a line here, and I think we're at it with
that would be the line in the sand for me for sure.
Yeah. There you go. All right. Well, nice talking to you.
Yes,
I think we covered a wide range of topics, including the manager cage match. We'll be back if the Phillies look. I mean, we said we're probably going to do about 4 or 5 shows between now and spring training as we try to transition over to a new show with a new title and all of that good stuff. So continue following us here, and then when we have the information about what comes next, we'll certainly share that. If the Phillies do something, we'll be back. If they don't, we'll probably be back in about 3 weeks or so post-Christmas to talk about the Phillies not doing anything again. And
I do think they will do something before the holiday. I don't think it's going to be big, but I do think that they'll add something before the holiday. I do.
Cole Hamels. They added Cole Hamels to the broadcast.
Yeah, we didn't even get to that. I'm curious to see how that's going to work.
I like Cole.
Anybody's better than Ben Davis.
Now, does that mean Ben's gone?
I don't know. I haven't seen an official release, to be honest with you.
Now, what if someone hears this and they're like, and they tag you at Ansan Philly, heard that shot you took at Ben Davis. I agree, he sucks. Like,
he's a Malvern prep guy. I'm a St.
So he reads that. Do you like bump up to him and like outside the press box? He goes, "Why did you say that?" Nah,
it's beneath me. It's a St. Joe's Malvern thing, right?
I don't know anything about that. I'm just a South Jersey guy, so public schoolsman. All right. Well, we will certainly talk soon. Thanks for listening, and have a happy holidays, everybody.